Chapter 42, Annabelle and Ike. President Eisenhower had regular big bridge games at the White House. To be invited to play was considered a tremendous honor. After Henry King was elected to the Senate, he insisted that his young wife learn to play, just in case such an opportunity arose. Annabelle was only 19 when her husband was elected senator, and she was 13 years younger than he was. She had been a competitive diver and nearly made the 1952 Olympic team. Henry King had watched the Olympic tryouts. He had seen her perfect body turning gracefully through the air. He overwhelmed her with his wealth and power, and they were married the day after her 18th birthday. In Washington, and no longer diving, the obedient wife channeled all her competitive energy into the game of bridge. She would play once a week with other congressmen's wives, Trapp said. They just played a penny a point, but she regularly came home with $40 or $50. One time she won 177, much to her husband's displeasure. Why? I asked. I thought he wanted her to learn bridge. He wanted his wife to fit in with the other genteel and dignified ladies, eat little tea sandwiches, that sort of thing. He didn't want a card sharp. In fact, he used to tell her to try not to do so well. Then the big moment came. 18 months after he was elected to the Senate, Senator King and his wife were invited to the White House to fill in at bridge. This is what he had hoped for, Trapp said. But it turned out to be the most humiliating experience of his life, and it was only the first of a series of humiliations. Eisenhower was quick to recognize Annabelle's bridge talent, and by comparison, Henry's lack thereof. Every compliment he paid to Annabelle was a slap in the face to her husband. The president made jokes at Henry's expense. Whenever Henry's the declarer, there are two dummies. The president, who had been a World War II general, believed that the same qualities that had made him a successful leader also made him a good bridge player. Judgment, patience, decisiveness, and most importantly, the ability to think clearly and plan ahead. Annabelle had all those qualities, said Trapp. Henry King had none of them. In the president's eyes, King wasn't just a bad player, he was an incompetent fool. But thanks to Annabelle, the Kings became regulars at the White House bridge game. She's smarter than you, Henry, and a hell of a lot better looking. Eisenhower once said to him, only partially in jest. Just what do you bring to the equation? In the end, Henry King did what once would have been unthinkable to him. He'd turned down a presidential invitation, making up some excuse about why he couldn't attend the bridge game. That's okay, Henry, Ike said to him. We don't really want you anyway. Just send your charming wife. That wasn't the first time he hit her. But it wasn't the last, Trapp said. He also forbid her to ever play bridge again. You have to understand, Alton, said Gloria. Those are different times. In many ways, a woman was considered the property of her husband. Especially if your husband was someone as rich and as powerful as Henry King, said Trapp. He was also 13 years older than her, so she felt dominated in that way as well. Hold on, I said. If she never played bridge again, how did you and she become partners? Once bridge gets in your blood, it's hard to quit. She started sneaking out of her house to play in bridge tournaments with one of the other wives from her bridge group. Of course, that woman didn't have anywhere near Annabelle's skill. Which is why she called you, I realized. Not just to borrow a book. Perhaps, said Trapp. I didn't know any of this when I first started playing with her. I didn't know that if her husband found out she had been to a bridge tournament, he would beat her. I am the king, that maniac would shout at her. It is your duty to serve and protect the king. Annabelle showed up at a tournament with a black eye. She laughed it off, claiming she had hit it against the corner of the kitchen cabinet when she had bent down to pick up an almond. On the second day of the tournament, she showed up with 2 black eyes. That was when I learned the truth, said Trapp. What did you do? I asked. What could I do? He asked me. Like Gloria said, those were different times. Police rarely got involved in so-called domestic squabbles. They certainly wouldn't get involved when the alleged wife-beater was a very powerful senator from a very prominent family. I asked her to be more careful. From the back seat, Gloria was once again gesturing for me to put an end to this question. Would she ever redouble? I asked. What? I repeated the question. Redouble? He asked. What do you even know about redoubling? Nothing, I said. I've never seen anyone use the redouble card. I was curious if Annabelle ever did. There's usually no reason to redouble, he said. You have very little to gain and a lot to lose. So she never did? He smiled, thinking about her. She did it all the time, he admitted. She'd do it to rattle the opponents, shake their confidence. But before you ever think about redoubling, you better be able to play the cards as well as Annabelle. In the back seat, Theodora had joined Gloria in her effort to get me to change the subject. but I still had one more question. I needed to be very careful how I asked it. It required finesse. When you first met Annabelle, I said, how old was Sophie? Sophie? He repeated. She must have been... Ha! He suddenly laughed. You know why he's asking that, don't you? Gloria and Theodora remained silent. He thinks I'm Sophie's father, Tony's grandfather. My nephew was accusing me of adultery. No, I was just curious, I said lamely. My blind uncle had seen right through me. Sophie was 3 years old when I first played bridge with her mother, he said, answering my question. Annabelle and I were bridge partners. Nothing more, nothing less.